chosen one. Stop scrolling. This message is not an accident. You were led here, not tomorrow, not next week, not someday, today. Because something happened this morning that changed everything. You thought it was a small moment, a simple prayer, a silent tear, a whispered surrender, a private decision nobody noticed. But heaven noticed, God noticed, the angels noticed, and right now something is shifting around your life in ways you cannot yet see. Listen carefully. There are moments when heaven moves according to a plan, and then there are moments when a chosen one does something so sincere, so faithful, so unexpected, that heaven begins rearranging itself around that act of obedience. This morning, you moved, and God responded. You prayed, and eternity listened. You surrendered, and heaven began recalibrating. The enemy thought you would quit. The enemy thought the heartbreak was too much. The betrayal was too deep. The loneliness was too heavy. The silence was too long. But somehow, you got up again, you prayed again, you trusted again, you believed again. And now God is saying, my child, you have no idea what your faith activated. Hear this clearly. The pain was never the end of your story. The delay was never your destination. The isolation was never your punishment. It was preparation, divine preparation, sacred preparation, holy preparation, because where God is taking you, most people could never survive the journey. That is why your road has been different. That is why your path has been lonely. That is why your spirit has always felt separate from the crowd. You were never meant to fit in. You were called to stand apart. You were chosen. Listen carefully. There are seasons when God speaks loudly, and there are seasons when God speaks through silence. Most people celebrate the loud seasons. Few understand the silent ones, but the silent seasons create the strongest warriors. The silent seasons build the deepest faith. The silent seasons reveal who truly trusts God. You have been walking through one of those seasons, a season where prayers seemed unanswered, a season where doors remained closed, a season where people disappeared without explanation, a season where your heart carried questions nobody could answer, yet somehow you kept believing, you kept praying, you kept moving. Even when nothing around you made sense, God is saying, I saw every step, every tear, every lonely night, every disappointment, every silent battle, every hidden sacrifice. Nothing was wasted, nothing was forgotten, nothing escaped my sight. The very things that wounded you are becoming the things that qualify you. The betrayal taught discernment. The heartbreak taught dependence on God. The rejection taught strength. The waiting taught faith. The silence taught trust. And now heaven is preparing to reveal why you had to endure it all. Because transformation always comes before elevation. Always. God never promotes people before preparing them. Preparation often feels like loss. What feels like loss today becomes power tomorrow. What feels like abandonment today becomes testimony tomorrow. What feels like confusion today becomes clarity tomorrow. And your tomorrow is closer than you think. Something happened this morning. Something deeper than you realize. Maybe nobody saw it. Maybe nobody celebrated it. Maybe nobody even knew it happened. But heaven knew. God knew. The spiritual world reacted. Because this morning was not about what you accomplished. It was about who you became. Many people think destiny changes through giant public victories. But often destiny changes through private decisions. A decision to forgive. A decision to pray. A decision to trust God one more day. A decision to keep going when every part of you wants to stop. A decision to surrender control. A decision to choose faith. That decision carries more power than you know, because heaven responds to faith. Not performance, faith. The kind of faith that keeps believing after disappointment. The kind of faith that survives betrayal. The kind of faith that remains standing after heartbreak. That is the faith God is honoring right now. The enemy watched your life, studied your weaknesses, observed your wounds, tried to predict your next move, and he expected you to break when they betrayed you. He expected you to break when they abandoned you. He expected you to break when they misunderstood you. He expected you to break when God seemed silent. He expected you to break. But this morning, you chose faith again. And that changed everything. Every time a chosen one chooses faith over fear, the enemy loses ground. Every time a chosen one chooses obedience over comfort, darkness retreats. Every time a chosen one chooses trust over panic, heaven advances. And heaven advanced this morning. You may not feel different yet, but spiritual shifts rarely begin with feelings. They begin with decisions. Your feelings are catching up. Your circumstances are catching up. Your environment is catching up. But heaven has already moved. God is saying, the breakthrough started before you could see it. Think about the seed underground. Nobody celebrates it. Nobody sees it. Nobody applauds it. Yet beneath the surface, life is already forming. Roots are already growing. Transformation is already happening. That is where many chosen ones are right now. Underground. Unnoticed, misunderstood, but growing. And God is reminding you today. Hidden does not mean forgotten. Delayed does not mean denied. Unseen does not mean unimportant. Your hidden season has purpose. Your waiting season has purpose. Your lonely season has purpose. Because God protects what He prepares, and He prepares what He plans to use. That is why isolation became part of your journey. Not because God abandoned you, because He was protecting you, separating you, strengthening you, teaching you, building spiritual muscles nobody else could see. The loneliness hurt, the silence hurt, the confusion hurt. But those experiences were creating a version of you capable of carrying greater responsibility. Listen carefully. There is something God wants you to understand. Not every wound was meant to destroy you. Some wounds were sent to reveal you. Some heartbreaks were allowed because they carried hidden purpose. Some betrayals were permitted because they were connected to your destiny. That is why the pain hit so deeply. Because the people who hurt you were not strangers. They were people you trusted, people you loved, people you prayed for, people you believed would stay. Yet somehow, they became part of your greatest lesson. The deepest betrayals often happen closest to your calling, right before breakthrough, right before elevation, right before transformation. The enemy knows he cannot stop what God has ordained. So he tries to exhaust it, discourage it, wound it, isolate it. You know what that feels like. You know what it feels like to be misunderstood, to carry burdens nobody sees, to smile while your heart is breaking, to wonder why people suddenly changed, why support vanished, why relationships collapsed, why people walked away. And for a long time, you blamed yourself, you replayed conversations, you replayed memories, you searched for answers. But God is saying today, my child, stop blaming yourself for doors I closed. Some people left because they chose to leave. Some people left because heaven removed them, because they could not enter the next chapter, because they were connected to your past, not your future, because they loved the old version of you, but feared the transformed version. Transformation changes everything. The moment God begins preparing a chosen one for elevation, separation begins, not because God enjoys isolation, but because purpose requires clarity, and clarity requires distance from confusion. There were voices God had to silence, influences God had to remove, oddments God had to break, distractions God had to eliminate, because your destiny was too important. Some people were never assigned to walk with you forever. They were assigned to teach you. The betrayal taught discernment. The rejection taught independence. The disappointment taught wisdom. The abandonment taught dependence on God. You thought you were losing people. God was developing strength. You thought your world was falling apart. God was rebuilding your foundation. You thought everything was ending. God was preparing a beginning. One of the greatest dangers for a chosen one is becoming emotionally attached to something God has already outgrown. God sees the future. You see the present. God sees the destination. You see the road. God sees the harvest. You see the seed. And sometimes God removes what feels good now, because He knows what is coming later. That is why trust becomes essential. Trust during silence, trust during confusion, trust during heartbreak, trust during delay, trust when nothing makes sense. Because faith is not believing after understanding. Faith is believing before understanding. And that is exactly what you have been doing, even when nobody noticed, even when nobody applauded, even when nobody understood. You kept believing. You kept praying. You kept standing. And heaven has seen every moment, every single moment. God is saying, I saw the nights you cried yourself to sleep. I saw the prayers nobody heard. I saw the disappointment. I saw the loneliness. I saw the fear. I saw the courage, and I never left. Chosen one, you have survived things that should have broken you. Think about that. There were seasons when you felt empty. Seasons when you felt exhausted. Seasons when you questioned everything. And yet, you are still here, still standing, still believing, still moving forward. That is not weakness. That is evidence of God's hand on your life. People without purpose often surrender to pressure. People carrying destiny develop endurance. And endurance is what separates the chosen from the crowd. The world celebrates talent. God develops character. The world rewards appearance. God examines the heart. The world notices success. God notices faithfulness. And faithfulness is what heaven has been building inside you, quietly, perpetually, powerfully. While everyone else was focused on visible results, God was strengthening invisible foundations, because anything built too quickly can collapse. Anything elevated without preparation can be destroyed. So God slowed the process, not to punish you, to protect you. Hear this clearly. The delay was mercy, the waiting was protection, the silence was preparation, the separation was wisdom. And one day you will thank God for what He refused to give you too early, because timing changes everything. Divine timing changes everything. The right blessing at the wrong time becomes a burden. The right opportunity at the wrong time becomes destruction. The right relationship at the wrong time becomes confusion. That is why God protects timing. That is why God guards seasons. That is why God sometimes says wait. Not because He is withholding, because He is preparing. Pain exposed who was real. Pressure exposed who was real. Waiting exposed who was real. And God allowed masks to fall, not so you would become bitter, but so you would become wise. The next season of your life requires wisdom. The next level requires wisdom. The next assignment requires wisdom. The next blessing requires wisdom. And wisdom is often born from pain. not comfort. Pain, the enemy thought the betrayal would make you quit. Instead, it made you stronger. The enemy thought the rejection would destroy your confidence. Instead, it deepened your faith. The enemy thought the heartbreak would silence your purpose. Instead, it awakened your calling. The enemy miscalculated, because God had a plan hidden inside the pain, and now that plan is beginning to unfold. Chosen one, something is changing. You can feel it, you sense it. You cannot fully explain it, but you know it is happening. The old version of you is disappearing. The fearful version, the doubting version, the people-pleasing version. The version that depended on approval, the version that chased acceptance. God is removing it and replacing it with something stronger, something wiser, something bolder, something prepared. Because transformation always comes before elevation, always. Do not be discouraged by what still looks unfinished. God often works behind the scenes. Roots grow before fruit appears. Foundations are built before buildings rise. Preparation happens before promotion. And what God is building in your life right now is bigger than you imagine, bigger than the pain, bigger than the delay, bigger than the confusion, bigger than the betrayal. Because your destiny was never dependent on people, it was always dependent on God. People may leave, God remains. People may disappoint, God remains. People may misunderstand, God remains. People may betray, God remains. And His promises remain, His calling remains, His purpose remains, His plan remains. Nothing can cancel what God has spoken over your life. Nothing. You are closer than you think. Closer to breakthrough, closer to healing, closer to clarity, closer to restoration, closer to purpose, closer to victory. The pain convinced you that you were moving backward. But heaven says you were moving forward all along. The silence convinced you that God forgot. But heaven says God was working all along. The delay convinced you that nothing was happening. But heaven says preparation was happening all along. You were never abandoned. You were being equipped. You were never forgotten. You were being strengthened. You were never overlooked. You were being prepared. And now, the season is changing. The atmosphere is shifting. The lessons are becoming revelations. The tears are becoming testimonies. The wounds are becoming wisdom. The struggle is becoming strength. The waiting is becoming breakthrough. God is saying, "My child, hold